All right, let's dive into something truly fascinating today. We're going to be talking about a corner of the law that actually tries to legislate morality. It's all about offenses against decency and good customs. Basically, the legal rules designed to protect those invisible threads that hold society together.
And really, it all boils down to this one question, doesn't it? This is the line in the sand that every single society tries to draw. And believe me, that line is constantly shifting with time and culture. So today, we're going to explore how the law even attempts to pin down this boundary, turning fuzzy ideas like decency into actual concrete rules you can break.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how society draws that line. Then we'll get into two very different types of offenses. I'm calling them the public outrage alarm and the mind virus. After that, we'll break down the anatomy of these offenses, look at some common defenses, and finally, we'll see just how high the price of indecency can be.
Okay, first up, drawing society's line. Think about it. Every community runs on a set of unwritten rules, right? A kind of shared gut feeling about what's okay and what's not. But what happens when someone doesn't just bend those rules, but completely shatters them? Well, that's when the law has to step in and turn those unwritten feelings into written, enforceable boundaries.
So what are we really talking about here? Look at the wording. Shocking public morals and violating societal norms. This isn't about your personal pet peeves or what you find offensive in the privacy of your own home. No, this is about actions that are so out of step with community standards that they actually disrupt the public peace. You can think of these laws as society's immune system. They kick in when an act threatens the overall health of the social body.
Now, how does the law enforce these boundaries? Well, it has two main tools in its toolbox, found in Articles 200 and 201. Article 200, which covers grave scandal, is kind of like a first responder. It deals with immediate, explosive public actions that cause a disruption right here, right now. But Article 201 is different. It's more like a public health authority, focused on preventing the spread of corrupting ideas and materials. So one is about an explosion, the other is about a contagion.
All right, let's start with Article 200. I want you to think of this one as a giant social fire alarm. It's not for little annoyances like someone cutting in line. This alarm is only for conduct that is so outrageous, so scandalous, that it triggers a genuine community-wide reaction, a collective, whoa, you cannot do that here.
And this is the language straight from the law. The phrase to focus on is highly scandalous conduct. That's a very high bar. And it's set that way on purpose. The law isn't trying to be the fashion police or get involved in every petty argument. It's zeroing in on behavior that truly shocks the conscience of the community where it happens. So how does a court figure out if someone has actually pulled this public outrage alarm? Well, they have a legal checklist, and they have to tick every single box. There are three essential ingredients. First, you've got the act itself. It must be public, and it must be scandalous. Second, the person's mindset. And third, the specific harm it caused, which is a disturbance to the public. If any one of these is missing, it's not a grave scandal. Let's dig into that first ingredient, the act. When it comes to grave scandal, it's all about location, location, location. The act has to be public. For instance, standing in the middle of a crowded music festival and screaming obscenities? Yeah, that's public, it's scandalous, and it's designed to shock. That's pulling the alarm. But doing that exact same thing all alone in the middle of a remote forest? Well, there's no public to disturb. The trees don't get offended, no public exposure, no crime.
Now, who can get in trouble for this? The law is crystal clear, any person. And this is a huge deal. It means the standard for how you behave in public applies to absolutely everyone. It doesn't matter if you're a CEO or a college student, famous or completely unknown. Your social status gives you zero protection here.
Okay, this next part is super important because it gets into the person's mindset. You might think, well, I didn't mean to cause a scene. The law says that might not matter. Of course, knowingly causing a scandal counts, but so does being reckless. That means you should have known your behavior was probably going to cause an uproar, but you just didn't care. It's like closing your eyes and sprinting through a busy intersection. Your total disregard for the risk is what makes you responsible.
And finally, the third box on our checklist, the harm. This is a vital point. The law isn't just punishing the act itself, it's punishing the consequences of the act, the ripple effect it sends through the community. The real crime is the disruption, the disturbance of public order, the offense to that collective sense of what's right. The action is just the trigger. The harm is the damage done to the social fabric.
Okay, so we've covered the sudden, loud explosion of a public scandal. Now, we're going to pivot to something the law sees as a much quieter, but maybe even more dangerous threat. If Article 200 was the fire alarm, think of Article 201 as a quarantine protocol. It's designed to contain what the law sees as a mind virus, immoral ideas and content that could slowly infect and corrupt the entire community.
So if we're talking about a mind virus, how exactly does it spread? Well, the law is very specific. It identifies 4 main transmission routes. You've got people publicly spouting doctrines that go against public morals. You have the whole supply chain of obscene literature, from writing it to selling it. Then there's running a business that deals in this stuff. And finally, putting on indecent shows or performances.
And check this out. Notice who the law is targeting here. Remember how for grave scandal it could be absolutely anyone? Not for this one. Article 201 zeroes in on people in specific roles: authors, editors, publishers, business owners. In our mind virus metaphor, these are the super spreaders, the ones with the power to push these ideas out to a massive audience.
And here is another huge critical difference: the required mindset. Remember that recklessness we talked about before? You can throw that right out the window here. For Article 201, the bar is set way higher. The offender has to have acted knowingly. They knew the content was immoral. And they have to have acted with intent. They actively wanted to spread it. This isn't an accident. It has to be a deliberate choice.
So what's the harm that this law is trying to stop? It's not that immediate shock and awe of a public scandal. It's something slower, more corrosive: the corruption of public morals. The idea here is that if this kind of content spreads unchecked, it could gradually eat away at a community's shared values, weakening the whole moral foundation of that society.
All right, so we've looked at the fire alarm and the mind virus on their own. Now, let's put them side by side under the legal microscope, because this is where the really crucial differences just pop right out.
Okay, everyone, if you remember just one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. The single biggest difference between these two crimes is the mental state required, what lawyers call mens rea. For a grave scandal, just being reckless, just not caring about the risk you're creating is enough. But for spreading immoral content, the prosecutor has to prove you intended to do it. You knew what it was and you wanted to get it out there. That is a night and day difference in a court of law.
So what happens when you actually get accused of one of these things? It's not an automatic conviction. The law isn't a blunt instrument. There are defenses, there are exceptions. So let's jump into the courtroom and see how you might actually fight back against these very different charges. What's really fascinating here is how the defense strategy perfectly reflects the crime. For grave scandal, the arguments are all personal. It's about your intent. I didn't mean to. You misinterpreted me. It was an accident. But for immoral content, the defense shifts away from you and onto the material itself. The argument becomes, this isn't just smut, it's art, or this has scientific value. You're defending the content's worth, not just your personal intentions.
And of course, in court, context is everything. Certain things can make the situation much, much worse for you. These are called aggravating factors. For a grave scandal, doing it in a highly sensitive place like a school makes it worse. For immoral content, how widely you spread it and whether you targeted kids are huge factors. On the flip side, things that can help you are called mitigating factors, like proving you really didn't mean to offend anyone.
We've gone through the crime, the mindset, the defenses. Now it's time for the bottom line, the consequences. What are the actual real-world stakes here? Because when you look at the penalties, you see exactly how the law feels about each of these offenses. And I'm telling you, the difference is absolutely staggering.
Whoa. Just take a second and look at that. No, that is not a typo. For a grave scandal, you're looking at a maximum of 6 months in prison. But for spreading immoral content, it's up to 12 years. That is a 24 times difference, and it tells you everything you need to know. The law sees the mind virus, the slow corruption of a society's morals, as an exponentially greater threat than the social alarm, a single disruptive act.
And if you think a dozen years in prison is bad, it doesn't stop there. We're also talking about the money. The financial penalties for spreading immoral content can go all the way up to 200,000 pesos. That powerful 1-2 punch of major jail time and heavy fines is designed to be a massive deterrent. So you have to be asking, why the much lighter sentence for grave scandal? Well, this quote right here gives us the legal thinking. The harm is seen as immediate, yes, but also temporary. It's a public disturbance. It shakes things up for a moment, but then things go back to normal. The penalty is designed to match that level of disruption. And on the flip side, How do they justify that massive 12-year sentence? Because the law sees the harm here as something way deeper, way more permanent. It's not just a disturbance, it's the potential corruption of public morals. It's seen as a direct assault on societal values that can cause long-term, maybe even irreversible damage. And that's why the consequence is so incredibly severe.
And all of this brings us right here, to today. Because these laws were written for a world of town squares, of printing presses, of physical stages. But our public square now is digital, it's algorithmic, it's global. So the huge unanswered question is, how do these ideas even apply anymore? When the public square is TikTok or YouTube, who gets to be the new judge of what's decent? Is it governments, the tech companies, us? That's the debate we're living in right now.